Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlog Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel. Today, I'm joined by Aben Buhner. No special introductions. We're getting straight past the fluff to the meat of the conversation. Astro Bot has been nominated for Game of the Year, and while we have had a very in-depth review of the game, which we uploaded around when the game came out, we're here to talk about it in the context of it being a frontrunner for Game of the Year, being nominated for many awards, and kind of looking back as Astro Bot as a part of this year as maybe one of the prominent games from PlayStation this year, and what it kind of means now that it is officially a Game Awards Game of the Year nominee, and if we think that it's going to win that award or the other awards. And so also stick around on this channel because we are going to be talking about each Game of the Year nominee in the context of it being that we already have a video up about the controversy, mostly of Shadow of the Erd Tree being nominated as a DLC, so I guess card in the corner to watch that. I don't even know if I'm going to add that, but Abram, take this conversation about our little squishy robot boy, whichever way the wind pleases you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'll just get it out of the way right at the top. I do think Astro Bot is going to win Game of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
In my view, if you look at the 6 nominees, I think Astro is the one with the most momentum and a sort of universal appeal that I think plays very, very well to this voting body, which is, for people who don't know, this is public information. You can go look at who votes for TGA on the website. It is a big aggregate of, from across the entire world, mostly like gaming press outlets.
Yeah.
And so when I look at Astro Bot, this really colorful and extremely highly lauded experience that you can get through in 10 hours, very low barrier to entry, the complete antithesis to the hoops you must jump through to play Shadow of the Erd Tree.
Yeah. And also Final Fantasy and Metaphor and to some way Black Myth Wukong.
Yeah, I really think that Astro has an extremely strong chance to win Game of the Year, which I think is quite important for the future of Astro Bot.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we've been having some conversations in this sort of post-launch period about Astro in a larger sense, outside of just the quality of the game itself, because we are both unanimous in our effusive praise of the game.
A unanimous 2-person agreement.
Yes.
We agree.
But I think where we've had a little bit of a difference is our appraisal of the impact of the game post-release.
Sure.
We know now that the game has sold about 1.5 million units as of Sony's report from, I believe it was last month, so obviously over the holiday, who knows what's going to happen. But in my view, that's not really a huge number. Well, I mean, in a very literal sense, it's not a huge number, but I think even for Astro Bot, I don't really think it's the mainstream commercial success and new mascot that Sony was looking for. Yeah. But I think to our in-group, to the in-group who is voting, Astro no doubt is. And the way that Astro has continued to hold attention through its speedrun levels and its updates, I think is just testament to the fact that Astro has really captured the imagination of, in this case, the people who matter, which in a literal sense is the people who can vote. So I really would not be surprised to see Astro win.
Okay, so I think we should start there if we think it's going to win or not. I think you present an interesting case for it being incredibly popular and very accessible with the voting body. Because it is a shorter game, because it is more colorful, it's in a genre that is something that appeals very, very closely to hardcore, but also to the games journalist types that are like, man, I want more games like this. I think it is important that it was nominated for Game of the Year to add some diversity, because the interesting thing about the slate of Game of the Year nominees this year is it is mostly it's 2 action RPGs, 2 JRPGs, and then a card game and a 3D platformer. Like it's a really imbalanced bunch. And I think Astro definitely sets itself apart by being that high quality 3D platformer game that sinks and sits in really well. And I think that it's also managed to keep itself in conversation with the updates, as you mentioned, of the speedrunning levels and adding the new VIP bots that people can go and rescue. And then I can see GIFs of them on Twitter of like, oh, hey, here's what the Helldivers or whatever are up to. But I don't think I share the same sentiment that it is a front runner, because I I don't know. I think that it's maybe too simple. I really don't know. I think the scope of these other games gives them a grandeur that I think other people
Sure.
find more impressive. It doesn't necessarily mean that I prefer those games over Astro Bot, but I don't share the same opinion that it's a front runner. It's in the conversation, believe it or not. But yeah, I don't think I agree, and I'm not exactly sure why.
No, I think it's a fair point because a dimension of the conversation around Astro that hadn't totally materialized by the time we did our review was sort of the skepticism and cynicism around the game as like an advertising vehicle. Now, obviously, we did touch on that in our discussion, but I think that sentiment definitely did bubble up a little bit more due to some extremely, I think, thoughtful pieces from major outlets like Kotaku about maybe why Astra's appeal rings a little bit hollow. And so I think that that's certainly a dimension of the conversation to continue to keep an eye on as we get closer to release. But I don't know if necessarily the scope is something that to me is a detriment to its chances at winning, because I think back to 2018 when God of War, which is a game of impressive cinematic grandeur, of course, but again, it looks very small next to Red Dead Redemption 2, indeed got the win. I think you can make a similar case for the win that Overwatch won in 2016, right?
Correct.
Over games like Uncharted 4 and things like that. I think that the voting body is willing to find the fun or willing to look at production like per square inch, as we talk about sometimes. And I think that Astro really does exemplify that. And when I think back on my time with the game, even though it's been a couple months now since I've played it, I really do reflect on just the sort of joyous feeling of the game and the attention to detail that Asobi put into every moment of it. And I think that those are the sorts of things that really stick with us as players as time goes on. I mean, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a very impressive game, but I don't think that the feel of it is as sort of transcendent as the feel of Astro's is. I think this might just be complete hokum, pardon my language, but I think the way the game literally feels in the hand is so singular because of the use of the technology and everything that it leaves a very deep impression on me, and I have to imagine many others as well. So when I just think about what it achieves in a small footprint, and when I look at some of the past winners, I just don't think that it being lesser than in scope is necessarily an issue. We talked about this with Mario Wonder last year, but I think in reality, Mario Wonder was nowhere near contention for the prize anyway. Whereas I think that in a year without a Baldur's Gate, sorry, I almost said without an Elden Ring, that's not true. In a year without a Baldur's Gate, I think that, these games that imprint themselves are going to have a really good chance.
Sure. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see as we get closer to the actual awards show, and as presumably at least some of these voting bodies will put up articles, or they'll make videos, or have conversations about here's what I don't know if many say like here's who we're voting for, but they're all obviously around that time are many conversations of here's who we think will win, personal or individual people from each of these teams saying, this is what I want to win, and how that conversation balances out. Because I think that this is, maybe other than 2021, the most competitive or unsure year that I've seen for the Game Awards in terms of what's actually going to win. Because I think there are strong narratives for most of the games, and I don't think any of them is that much stronger than the others. And Astro Bot, to your point of it being an easier to access game and easier to see through to the end, may get a bump in this time frame of people being like, okay, it's been nominated, I haven't played it yet, it'll be very easy to knock this one out, to get it out of the way, to pop it in, get a code, whatever, and see it through to the end. And of course, it has a very great ending. It leaves a great taste in your mouth. You're celebrating. It's fun. It's kinetic. It's very compact. And I think that could certainly benefit it, because I'm currently in the position where, for this series of videos, both Black Myth Wukong and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth being games I had untouched before the nominations came out, I'm feeling an awkward pressure of, I need to have played these games, or at least I want to have played these games,
Yeah.
at least a little bit, or ideally to completion, before talking about them, so I can have an informed opinion, not just completely talking out of my ass. I did the same. I did the same last year for Baldur's Gate 3, and I imagine there are some people that are in my position of, I didn't pick up Black Myth Wukong, I didn't try Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I didn't try Metaphor. I'm not into Elden Ring. It is DLC. There's these narratives for all 4 of those games that are like, yeah, I'll start it. I gotta start it because it's part of the conversation. But will I see those to the end? But Astro doesn't really have that same caveat on it.
No, and neither does Balatro, and we'll talk about it. But in my view, and maybe this is just not true, but it's a race between those two.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think you make a good point that in a year with, as I was saying, no front runner, that uncertainty is exciting in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And I think Black Myth Wukong has no chance. No. In my view, it has absolutely no chance.
Not with this voting body, no. I mean, no. If this was a fan voted thing that had a little bit more weight, there certainly are enough people out there who are ride or die for that game to where it's not an unpopular game, and it is not it is not one without a fan base and merits that could buoy it, but not with the pool of people we're working with.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm excited to give it a try myself. I don't anticipate it's going to be my favorite monkey game of the year, but, there's always a chance. Yeah. But to bring the conversation back to Astro, and I think the way that Astro sort of looms large over an uncertain year, I think about the fact that, obviously Astro was not even a known quantity until the summer.
Yeah.
And I think the way that it has captivated attention in that time frame is very exciting, and even if it doesn't win at TGA, in my view, it is in some ways the game of the year.
Sure.
If you think about it, showing sort of a new way for PlayStation Studios to operate, to have this very Nintendo style, not Nintendo style game, even though it's very heavily Nintendo coded. It's
the best Nintendo game of the year. Let's not give that any slack.
It's very Nintendo in its rollout and its strategy. And so I think Sony doing that and so effortlessly captivating the attention of media and fans alike, and sort of being able to position this game inadvertently just through the passion of the people who experienced it as a sort of beacon for what AAA can do. Whether or not Astro is AAA is actually a discussion that we litigate in a manner of speaking in another video we have coming out soon. But when I look at the games that have sparked conversation, that have done the most, that have touched the most people, that reached the highest level of critical acclaim, I just think that Astro excels in every dimension.
Yeah, I think that your point of it being different is another big thing. Obviously, I mentioned earlier that there are these other 4 games that are a little bit more traditional in terms of their scope, their production value, that are 4 of the 6 nominees, and Astro does set itself apart. But I think that is to the point you were making of this representing this year. That's what I think of when I think of 2024. I actually pretty consistently think of the top budgeted or tentpole games not being the ones that dominate conversation. Time and time again, we saw this year games from Ubisoft, games from Square Enix, games from these long-running franchises come out and do fine enough, but certainly not capture the imagination of the people, the internet at large, mostly. But I think you can change the sample size down to say they also didn't quite as acutely capture the minds of the voting body here, the gaming press, as opposed to the weirder, nicher games, one-person games coming out of nowhere, different genre, like totally trying something new games. And Astro is a middle ground because it is from an established studio. It is a PlayStation published game. It is a game of high production value. It had marketing because it has PlayStation's budget behind it. But It was announced in the summertime. It's a new game from PlayStation in the way that a lot of people hadn't played Astro Bot Rescue Mission. So I think that could help it out. But a lot of the things that we're talking about here honestly just make me excited to get to the Balatro conversation, because I'm like, all this stuff just applies to Balatro even stronger.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually just looking at something here. I was looking at Metacritic, and I was looking at meta scores. Elden Ring, Astro, and Metaphor all have a 94.
Wow.
But what's interesting is that Elden Ring's 94 is based on 70 reviews. Metaphor's review score is based on 50 reviews. And Astro Bot's 94 is based on 138
Holy shit.
reviews.
Wow, okay.
So, again, it's all sort of conjecture what goes into the minds of these different outlets when they're casting their vote. It's all just speculative, what we think moves the needle for them, what doesn't, what we think they've played and they haven't, we don't know. But if you look at just simply the raw numbers from the acclaimed verified critics, the ones that have a vote to give, it to a higher degree, the accolades have been given to Astro, which speaks to a sort of a universal quality to the game.
Yeah.
Balatro has a lower score, not by a ton. It's got a 90.
Oh, boo-hoo!
But Balatro's score is based on 34 reviews. Now,
Gotcha.
Balatro is obviously the sort of game that has caught a lot of people by surprise and snowballed into something quite large. And we'll save that conversation for the Balatro episode. But I think, from my view, if I were voting, if BLB was allowed to vote, and Jeff Keighley approached us, but we turned him down as just a scheduling issue.
A scheduling issue. Yeah, we just didn't have time to sit down and talk about video games in our schedules.
I would be looking at this. I would be looking at Astro Bot for all the reasons you were just laying out, the reasons I've been laying out, and lauding it for that. And I'd be looking at these numbers, the volume of coverage for Astro Bot, and thinking, okay, I have to imagine a lot of my peers are feeling the same way.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Again, this is just pulling stats that are maybe or maybe not germane to how the voting body is gonna actually vote. But in my view, there's a momentum there that I don't know how many of the other nominees have. Now, of course, I would say that Baldur's Gate was the most complicated game, the least accessible game of the nominees last year. So it cuts both ways, right?
Yeah.
And you could probably make a case that if you've got a round table of people at an outlet casting a vote, maybe only one or two of them have played, let's say, Metaphor, and they make an amazing case for the political messaging Metaphor, the direction of the game, and everyone else around the table says, you know what, okay, I really liked Astro, I played Astro, but you're making this amazing case, let's vote that way. Everything I'm saying might be moot. Maybe those 50 critics who cast their vote for Metaphor are the 50 most persuasive voices in games media. I'm not sure. But if I were a betting man, and you can bet on literally everything, so I imagine you can bet on TGA, I would bet on Astro.
So I did want to quickly go through the categories that it was nominated in and see just one by one if we think that it'll be winning those, and see if that's not necessarily an indication that it'll win or not, especially in a year as sort of mixed as this one. But Astro was nominated for Best Family Game against Princess Peach Showtime, Mario Party Jamboree, Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, and Plucky Squire. It's easily going to win this. I don't think it has very strong competition this year.
I don't know. I don't know. Because I think it's, from my view, because it's so strong for Game of the Year, I can see people saying, okay, actually, Family Game, this is the best Mario Party ever, or this Zelda's really good. I already voted for Astro over here. I'm not going to vote for it here. I don't know to what extent that applies. I don't think Family Game is as cut and dry.
I just think it's the clear favorite of these. Like, I think that narrative that you're talking about is something that we talk about quite consistently when we're talking about Oscars, and I think it also can apply to Game Awards. But I think it's also something that I've just over time been like, I don't really think many people think that way. I think you take a category by category, and you're looking like, okay, well, what's the best game there, and also the best game for families. And I think Astro is the example there, because it is a game that can be very accessible for children. I've seen many people posting videos of their children playing Astro Bot and beating bosses, kind of being one of the first like slightly tougher games that they're getting into. And of course, Mario Party Jamboree being a party game is certainly in that area, but I don't think Showtime is that competition. I don't think Plucky Squire is competition, and I don't think Zelda is competition either, because that's just because it's colorful. I mean, we get one of those every fucking year where it's like, in what way is this actually a family game?
Well, I would argue that. Well, I don't know. I think that family game is probably the worst category at the Game Awards, because I think it's the one that makes the least sense, colorful, and obviously, like, there's the least, in my view, methodology behind why anything is nominated here other than game is colorful. Yeah. If Astro even had like a co-op mode, I would think it's a shoo-in. But it's like a family game in the sense that any individual member of the family could play at any time by themselves and have fun. Yeah. So that's why, I look at all those nominees, and because I cast my votes for the Game Awards this morning, because fans can vote as well. Yeah. I voted for Jamboree, because when I'm thinking, what game can a family actually sit down and enjoy together? I only see one option.
Well, it's literally the only multiplayer game.
Yeah.
So, but for that point, I think that you're right. Jamboree is kind of the only one that's like competing. Yeah. But I also think that while it's a very good game and I had fun with it, I think that just Astro's quality and its appeal, the fan base appeal to the people voting, I think is strongest with that. And I think what's interesting is you say, like, okay, is it a family game because it's really only single player? Okay, well, that applies to 4 out of 5 of the nominees. So then, so that's kind of a wash for most of the options. And then quality is really what raises Astro above. So we don't know on that one. I say yes. You say Mario Party, I guess.
Yeah, I think I don't think Astro will win.
Next up, best action adventure game. Astro Bot nominated alongside Prince of Persia: Lost Crown, Silent Hill 2, Star Wars Outlaws, and Echoes of Wisdom. I think this is the funniest Game Awards category that's ever existed.
Yeah, that's another really bad category. This one's a real toss-up.
Do you have a pick personally?
No, my pick is Zelda. I mean, my favorite game of the year is Zelda.
Yeah.
So
do you think it'll win? No shot in hell. No shot in hell. It's a reasonably well regarded game, but it's just like it kind of just come and gone. I just don't think people care, and frankly, I'm surprised it was nominated.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like these individual categories are just like it's all finger in the air type of stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely. Gonna make the show a lot more interesting this year rather than okay, Baldur's Gate's taking this, okay, yep, that's taking that. Like, this is gonna be an interesting one to watch.
Well, because there's also an interesting observation that Giovanni Colantonio made in reflecting on the nominees that I think is really important. As he notes, there's no branch voting at TGA as opposed to the Oscars or things.
Definitely.
And because of that, these more specialist categories, as he says, end up being, and by specialist in this case, I kind of mean everything that isn't Game of the Year. It kind of becomes an amalgamation of like random big or popular games, in a way that's like not super indicative of the year. I think in my view, this is where the Game Awards are the most flawed in terms of just the process of selecting.
100%.
So I kind of think that the methodology that people are applying to voting for these categories is which game is my favorite. And so you're probably right that Astro takes it. I just think it's kind of silly in the first place that these games are together. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Again, branch voting, that's a great thing to advocate for, I feel. Yeah. But the other, it's a systemic issue, right? Because, okay, we want branch voting. Well, who's going to do that?
Because there's not branch unions, which is how the Oscars does it.
Because also this is not industry voted.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting, it's a larger conversation. I think we could have a fun discussion. Pencil this into your brain. Audience, pencil this into your expectations. we could do a video about like how do you improve the Game Awards.
Sure.
And in my view, a big way you improve the Game Awards is just simply have developers vote.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest flaw by fucking country mile, personally.
Yeah.
But yeah, action adventure. I'm still gonna go with Astro. I think that's a fan favorite out of those. I think it's not my favorite, but it's the highest quality. And it's also the only Game of the Year nominee out of that list, which always gives them a bump if it's alone in a category. It was also nominated for Best Audio Design alongside Black Ops 6, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Hellblade 2, Senua's Saga, and Silent Hill 2.
It's not winning this one.
No fucking shot. I'm going to say Call of Duty or Hellblade.
Yeah, I voted for COD, but because I didn't play Hellblade.
No.
And I imagine that might be a thought process that's going to pervade people voting in this category. But also I think a lot of people go, oh, sound, that's Senua's thing.
True. Yeah. So, but this is the first one where I'm really not confident that Astro's going to... Well, not to say it isn't deserved. I think it does really exceptional things with sound design. I'm actually very glad to see frankly, a more simple, colorful game be nominated for a tech category like this. Asobi is great in their technical areas, and it's usually these kind of games get overlooked for the games that have grander scope. Of course, there is more complexity that goes into creating the soundscape for something that is a horror game or a shooter or an adventure game. But Astro, with the way that the DualSense speaker is used, with the way that there's all sorts of contextual sounds, I think it's a totally deserving nominee. But it's not.
Yeah, it's probably the only game that I've ever played that doesn't annoy me when it makes sound from the controller.
Yeah. Well, it was also nominated for Best Score in Music alongside Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Metaphor, ReFantasio, Silent Hill 2, and Stellar Blade.
It's not winning that
no
one.
fucking shot. It's winning this.
There's like 2,000 music tracks in Final Fantasy.
That's true. Though I will say, even though the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC discourse has been incredibly annoying over the last few days, the one that offends me most on a personal level is people saying Astro Bot's score sucks. And I was pointed at one person in particular, which is you and Bo. You're really one person in my mind because you have such shitty takes in this area.
Yeah, I don't like the score at all.
I think that's bunk.
I like the Yoshi's New Island score more.
No, you don't.
No, I don't.
But yeah, it's going to be Final Fantasy or Metaphor probably. Best Art Direction, nominated alongside Black Myth Wukong, Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, Metaphor ReFantasio, and Neva.
Not winning this one.
No, it's not winning this at all. I think that this one I'm surprised to see, not because I do think that the art direction is one of the weaker elements of the game personally, but it's also not new. Like there's just very little new art direction going on here, because it's based very strongly off two previous games that the team made.
It doesn't even really do the Tears of the Kingdom thing, because we had this conversation about Tears of the Kingdom last year, because it was also up for art direction, but that game has a really refreshing color palette in comparison to Breath of the Wild, and this game is in no way distinct from Rescue Mission or Play Ruminant's aesthetic. Yep.
And also Metaphor or Neva is going to
win. I think it'll be Metaphor.
Yeah, probably, and deservedly so. The last one to talk about is Game Direction, which the nominees are the same as Game of the Year.
Can you refresh me what the fuck they define Game Direction as?
Well, I'm on GameSpot's thing, so.
God, I just fucking exposed you. Hold on, I'm pulling it up. View all categories. Best Direction. Awarded for outstanding creative vision and innovation in game direction and design. I voted for Metaphor because I thought the category was art direction because I wasn't paying attention.
Well, now that you know, what would you have voted for, and do you think Asher is going to win?
Does it change my vote button? I'm going to change my vote, and I'm going to give the vote to Astro Bot.
Oh, okay. And do you think it'll win?
I don't know. I don't know. I think that people don't understand what game direction means.
Yeah.
If I had to hazard a guess.
Yeah.
The reason I really like the game direction is Nicholas Doucette. Is that how you say his name?
Mm-hmm.
I really, really love his vision
Yeah.
and the way he's talked in interviews about the processes of iteration that the team
100%.
undergoes, and the way that they have a very open, positive, critical, creative process of collaboration and sharing, swapping ideas, iterating on small things, implementing them into the game. I think that they just have such a clear process and method for making games.
100%. Yeah. Yes.
So in my view, I love that. I just adore it. It's the same process as Mario Wonder, and I think that's just simply the way to get the most varied and exciting and polished games. So yeah, I love the direction of Astro.
Yeah, I think that process is my favorite aspect of the game. Period. Just learning about what went into it and how collaborative and interesting and unique it was. But I don't necessarily think that unlike Mario Wonder, I don't think it shows up as much in the final product to just like the undiscerning eye. And there are plenty of people that aren't aware of the way that the game's development was structured. And so for me, I don't think that it'll win because I think that for me, game direction is focus on a concept, like how cohesive all of the elements are and how well they come together, and also for me how unique the vision is. So coming up with a unique vision and then executing it on it to a high degree. And for me, that really is just metaphor here. I think that metaphor, from its writing to its art direction to its music to its characters to its combat, it is the most focused and unique creative vision of these nominees. I don't think necessarily of the year, but I think I would very clearly give it to metaphor, and I think that there's a strong case for it to win. But this is again a category that, you're right, not a lot of people know exactly what it means. I don't think their definition is terrible, but I don't think it's particularly illuminating. And I think because this year is very muddled in terms of where people's allegiances lie, I have no idea what's going to win this.
Animal Well should win this category.
Do you actually think that?
Yeah, I do.
Cool.
I think that Animal Well is obviously it's a different scale because Billy made that game mostly on its own, not entirely, but mostly. So having a cohesive and innovative approach to direction is quite easy when you're only directing yourself for the most part. Yeah. But yeah, I would. There's other games that like I'd get hit with a hammer if I said should win game direction. Like I think Penny's Big Breakaway should be in for game direction. I think Echoes of Wisdom is an exceptionally directed game. There's a lot of stuff that I would put in this category, but well,
they're not in there.
They're not in there.
Said Black Myth Wukong is in there.
Yeah, the game that. Never mind.
I don't even know where you're just going with that.
Never mind.
But that covers all of them, and I honestly do think that, like, looking through this, I think most of the categories that it's in, I think Astro has a very strong shot of winning, but I don't necessarily think that means that I believe that it'll win Game of the Year. But again, we'll see. This is the least confident I've been in the most categories ever for the Game Awards, which is, I think, very refreshing. We've had I'd say over half of the Game Awards years are like, well, this is probably just going to sweep, or it's going to be like between two of these games and they're just going to win basically everything. But I think we're going to have a really nice spread this year in terms of winners.
I certainly hope so. And I think it's going to result also in some very interesting conversations as the year itself is wrapped about really what 2024 had to offer. Yeah. And what we take from it.
That's a fucking deep cut.
Yeah, it is. It is. I remember where I was when you pitched that Sorf thing. I was standing in a line in California as Jean got her COVID shot. Oh. It was in like an airplane hangar.
And that was the last time you saw her. That's so sad.
I know.
Well,
it turned her into 5G when she got the shot.
Oh. 5J. Jean.
She exists all around us in the 5G airwaves like a force ghost.
Oh, nice. Well, I think this video has gone slightly off the rails, but thank you very much for listening to our conversation about Astro Bot and its chances and context as a Game of the Year nominee. Check out the rest of the videos right now. This is the outro.
I wonder if we're gonna get a information about COVID-19 fucking tag on our video now. The trouble is that the next game I want to emulate on my Steam Deck is the PS2 Curious George game.
I'm sure that's true.
Which is not even a joke. Sometimes I'll be like sitting at my desk and I'll have like a fucking blinding light that strikes me. And like in this bright light in sans serif font appears the name of like a licensed game I played when I was like 4. And it makes me go look it up and be like, what was this about?